núcleo da ilusão. A mentira que vamos destruir hoje é a de que a aposentadoria precoce exige um golpe de sorte, um salário de nível executivo ou uma vida de privação que destrói a alma. O sistema convenceu a classe média de que, à medida que sua renda aumenta, você tem a obrigação moral de abandonar a simplicidade e escalar seu consumo para sinalizar sucesso. A realidade brutal é que os raros indivíduos que escapam do labirinto aos 40 anos fazem isso por se recusarem, com frieza calculada, a abandonar 8 comportamentos rígidos que a sociedade moderna rotula como vergonhosos, antissociais ou sinal de fracasso. A pergunta de retenção da parte 1: qual é a linha invisível que o arquiteto da riqueza silenciosa se recusa a cruzar, aceitando de bom grado ser tratado como um perdedor pelos colegas de escritório, apenas para garantir que sua liberdade não seja confiscada pelos juros? O mapa de Dor, o que a parte 1 expõe. A armadilha visível da adequação obrigatória. Colocamos sob o microscópio o pobre premium, que usa financiamentos agressivos para simular vitória, enquanto o verdadeiro vencedor é publicamente ridicularizado por manter a mesma rotina austera do início da sua carreira. O que a parte 2 aprofunda: o custo psicológico da resistência. A exaustão de nadar contra a maré do Keeping Up with the Joneses, enfrentando o ostracismo por se recusar a pagar o imposto da conveniência e por boicotar o delírio coletivo das atualizações perpétuas de estilo de vida. O que a parte 3 prova: a lente matemática do custo de oportunidade. Uma dissecação irrefutável de como quebrar a disciplina desses 8 hábitos para agradar o ego alheio converte recompensas banais de dopamina em décadas adicionais de submissão a um emprego que você odeia. O que a parte 4 resolve? A pílula vermelha do stealth wealth e o abraço à irrelevância. A libertação suprema de ser subestimado pelo sistema enquanto opera nas sombras para comprar a posse definitiva do seu próprio tempo. O gatilho de entrada. A descrição claustrofóbica do estacionamento de um prédio comercial em uma manhã chuvosa de segunda-feira. Uma frota de SUVs de luxo, todas financiadas em 84 meses, conduzidas por gerentes à beira de um colapso nervoso, contrastando violentamente com um sedã arranhado e quitado há uma década, dirigido pelo único homem naquele prédio que já possui capital suficiente para nunca mais precisar voltar lá. Verificação de originalidade. Este roteiro extirpa o lixo motivacional. Não haverá dicas batidas sobre investir o troco do pão. O foco será na anatomia de hábitos defensivos de alto nível. A blindagem à inflação de estilo de vida, o boicote à economia de microassinaturas e a capacidade sociopata de suportar o tédio sem recorrer à terapia do varejo. O mapa de capítulos. Palavra gatilho escolhida. Role, ordem exata. Role 1, The Anti-Upgraded Protocol. Role 2, The Convenience Tax Boycott. Role 3, The Algorithmic Deafness. Role 4, The Opportunity Cost Obsession. Role 5, The Depreciating Asset Ban. Role 8, The Reverse Lifestyle. Creep Rule. 7, the Stealth Wealth Mandate Rule. 8, the Solitude of Freedom. Look closely at the architecture of a typical middle-class neighborhood. The manicured lawns, the 2-car garages, the endless delivery boxes piled on front porches. It looks like prosperity. But if you strip away the drywall, you don't find wealth. You find a mountain of unsecured debt and a quiet, desperate panic. Society doesn't punish the financially unstable. Society punishes the individual who actively refuses to play the game of looking rich. That is the invisible crime the early retiree commits every single day. Let's dissect the mechanics of this trap. When you hit a certain age, a silent alarm goes off in the cultural matrix. The reliable, paid-off car is suddenly considered embarrassing. You are pressured by an invisible committee of coworkers and targeted algorithms to upgrade your existence. The corporate machinery knows that a financially secure employee is a dangerous employee. If you are content, you have leverage. You can walk away. So the system mandates a constant inflation of desires. The bank doesn't just build the mousetrap. They convince you to proudly assemble it yourself, just to prove you belong to the pack. You don't buy luxury for utility. You buy it to broadcast your relevance. But to escape, you must let the illusion shatter. Rule 1. The anti-upgrade protocol. The most lethal disease of the workforce is lifestyle creep. You get a promotion, a $10,000 bump in your salary. The standard reaction? You celebrate by creating new financial chains. You lease a vehicle for $600 a month. You move to an overpriced apartment. By the end of the year, that raise has generated permanent liabilities. You make more money, but your cash flow is suffocating. The individual who buys their freedom at 40 operates differently. They trigger the anti-upgrade protocol. When their income doubles, their expenses remain completely frozen. They absorb the social friction of looking like a failure, knowing every extra dollar is purchasing equity instead of metal. They refuse to upgrade their lifestyle because they are busy upgrading their autonomy. But resisting big purchases is only half the battle. The system has a secondary, invisible trap for the exhausted worker. Rule 2, the convenience tax boycott. We live in a service economy that preys on your emotional fatigue. You endure a 50-hour week for a manager who sees you as disposable. By Wednesday night, your cognitive bandwidth is depleted. So, you pay $35 for a mediocre meal delivered to your door. You pay premium fees for micro-subscriptions to numb your brain before passing out. This is the convenience tax. The machine grinds you down during the day, then sells you overpriced comforts at night to help you tolerate the exhaustion. You are funding your own captivity. The early retiree refuses this tax with militant discipline. They embrace the friction of daily chores, aware that buying back time tomorrow requires protecting capital today. They don't care if they look cheap, because while you pay for convenience, they are silently building an empire. The trap isn't just physical, it's digital. Your phone knows when your cognitive defenses are down. It tracks your location when you leave a stressful meeting and immediately serves you an ad for a vacation you can't afford. The middle class sees this as serendipity. The architect of early retirement sees it as an attack. Rule 3. The algorithmic deafness. You cannot escape the maze if you are constantly listening to the architect of the cage. Every time you log onto a platform, you are entering a hostile negotiation for your net worth. The people who clock out at 40 have developed a psychological firewall. They are deaf to the algorithm. When society says you deserve a reward, they recognize the bait. I view modern marketing not as an exchange of goods, but as a legalized extraction of your life force. The system doesn't want you to buy a product. It wants you to buy an identity. And identities are brutally expensive to maintain. This brings us to the blood and bone of the issue. The numbers. If you still think sacrificing these comforts is extreme, you don't understand the true price of your decisions. You think you're spending cash. You aren't. You are spending decades. Rule 4. The opportunity cost obsession. Let's tear away the emotion and look at the unfeeling math. You get the promotion, and instead of freezing your expenses, you lease the luxury SUV. It costs you $800 a month. You tell yourself you earned it. You tell yourself it's just $800. It is never just $800. If you took that exact $800 a month, the money you are bleeding out to look successful at red lights, and put it into a basic index fund, returning 8%, do you know what happens? In 30 years, that lease didn't cost you a few $1,000s. It cost you $1.1 million. Read that number again in your head. $1.1 million. You didn't buy a car. You bought an anchor. You traded your 50s and 60s for a leather steering wheel and a new car smell that faded in 3 weeks. Every time you tap your card for an upgrade, you're transferring years of your finite life to a banking executive who is already retired. The math of the rat race relies entirely on your financial illiteracy. The banks pray you only look at the monthly payment, because the moment you calculate the opportunity cost, the illusion shatters. You realize every dollar spent on a liability is a soldier you sent to die, which leads to the hardest boundary to maintain. Rule 5, the depreciating asset ban. The middle class is obsessed with acquiring things that rust, rot, and become obsolete. They build a museum of depreciation in their own homes. The early retiree looks at a depreciating asset like poison. They refuse to park capital in anything that loses 20% of its value the second it leaves the lot. If an item doesn't pay you to own it, it's a parasite on your balance sheet. They drive the invisible sedan not because they can't afford the German import, but because luxury is just a tax on ego. What is truly miserable? Driving a flawless car to a job that makes you want to scream, or driving a scratched sedan to the bank to deposit your dividends. Knowing the numbers isn't enough. You have to be willing to disappear entirely. If you have survived the math, you are ready for the cure. But I warn you, the antidote to the rat race is a bitter pill. You cannot buy your way out of this trap. You have to subtract your way out. The system relies on your ego to keep you chained to a desk. The moment you destroy your need for external validation, the bars of the cage dissolve. This brings us to the ultimate behavioral shift. Rule 6. The reverse lifestyle. Creep society expects your spending to rise with your income. The people who break the lock do the exact opposite. As their salary increases, they actively hunt for ways to decrease their baseline costs. They don't just freeze their expenses, they ruthlessly cut the fat. Why? Because every dollar you eliminate from your required monthly baseline is a dual-action weapon. It increases your investment capital today, and it permanently lowers the threshold of money you need to survive tomorrow. While their co-workers are celebrating a bonus by upgrading to a corner office wardrobe and a zip code they can barely afford, the architect of freedom is quietly canceling subscriptions, negotiating insurance rates, and buying bulk groceries. They are widening the gap between what they earn and what they burn. That gap isn't just savings. That gap is the exact measurement of their impending freedom. But maintaining this gap requires a psychological armor that most people are simply too fragile to wear. Rule 7. The stealth wealth mandate. To win this game, you must become a ghost. You have to find profound, deeply selfish joy in being completely underestimated. The average consumer is terrified of looking broke. They will finance a $70,000 truck just to make sure the neighbor they secretly hate knows they are doing okay. The early retiree looks at that behavior with clinical pity. They operate under the stealth wealth mandate. They wear unmarked clothing. They live in neighborhoods well below their means. They drive vehicles that blend into the asphalt. They do not want the attention of salesmen, financial advisors, or envious relatives. They understand that status is a tax levied on the insecure. The moment you signal wealth, you attract predators. So they hide in plain sight. They let the world think they are struggling, while their dividend portfolio quietly overtakes their annual salary. They find absolute power in knowing they could buy the entire dealership, but choosing to walk away instead. Yet even if you master the math and hide your wealth, there is one final boss you must defeat to claim your autonomy. Rule 8, the ruthless void acceptance. We have been conditioned since kindergarten to follow a schedule. 8 hours of school, followed by 40 years of an 8-hour workday. We are addicted to being told what to do. When you finally buy back your time, the noise stops. And for most people, that silence is terrifying. They don't know who they are without a job title. Without a boss handing them a deadline, they panic. They cure that panic with mindless consumption. The true escapee has mastered the ruthless acceptance of the void. They have learned how to sit in a quiet room, completely alone, without swiping a credit card to feel alive. They embrace the boredom, because they know that on the other side of that boredom is absolute self-mastery. They don't need a corporate retreat or a luxury cruise to find meaning. They find it in the mundane reality of owning their own Tuesday morning. The exit isn't a magical number in a bank account. It is a fundamental rewiring of your brain. It is the realization that the cheese was poisoned and the maze was built by people who want you to run forever. If you made it to the end of this, you are no longer running blind. Drop a comment saying, "Invisible Empire." The rest of the pack will think you are speaking nonsense. But we will know you have stopped running. My name is Daniel Rath. I will see you outside the cage.